All right, what's going on, guys? We'll wait a couple minutes for a couple of you to hop on, then we'll get rolling. But Florida got the dub. It wasn't pretty. 42-0, which is kind of weird to say after a 42-0 victory. But Vanderbilt's obviously not good. Florida was a 39-point favorite, I think, the last I saw, and Florida ended up winning 42-0. But Dan Mullen wasn't pleased the entire game. I don't know exactly what he said. I'm trying to look that up now. What he said in the post game, but I know I was at the game, so that's why I'm hopping on a little late. But the offense was at times. Anthony Richardson, who I thought was going to play a little bit more, he didn't play that well. Emory Jones played decent at first and not as good in the second half, I thought. Run game was somewhat there. Defensively, my goodness, if Vanderbilt would have just done what they were supposed to do and execute, Vanderbilt would have had a touchdown and had 3 field goals. They would have had 16 points. But Vanderbilt just couldn't get out of their own way. As if you're just joining us, this is the Gators final report. I am the host, Dylan_Denmark. You can catch this at the SEC and the Florida Gator channel at the Voice of College Football, hosted by Mark Rogers. Make sure you guys are subscribing and checking out all of the other channels with Iowa. There was a great game between Oklahoma and Texas. There's a post game for that show. I was watching the end of that game. The Georgia game. Carlos Goval's Tennessee got them a nice one. They've scored over 100 points in the last 2 games. There's a post-game show for the Georgia game after they play Auburn. That game's going on now, 3:30. But right now, we talk about the Gators. Halftime, the first half was pretty bad, pretty pitiful for Florida. Relatively speaking, you put together your worst game plan. You have your worst game of the year against Kentucky last week. It's 21-0 at the half. Florida has 215 yards. Vandy's 200 yards. Vandy has 12 passing yards and 52 rushing. Vandy has 148 passing yards and 52 rushing. Third down, Vandy was 2 for 5. And Emory was decent, 7 for 12, 112 yards. But the execution, it was 21-0, but it felt like Vandy was right there in it. I mean, there was like 4 drives where Vandy moved the ball at will on Florida's defense, and most of it was in the curl flat. I don't know if you guys could notice that. Every time that they went to the flat, it was about late in the first, early in the second half. Vandy just did whatever they wanted to do, pretty much right there. But luckily, Vanderbilt's not very good, because if that quarterback was decent for Vanderbilt, he probably would have had 4 or 5 touchdowns. And again, I mean, I said this earlier in the year with Florida, when Florida played Florida Atlantic and USF. I didn't know what the game plan was. And Dan Mullen said later on, when Florida played USF, that Dan Mullen put Emory Jones in bad situations to see what he had out of him. And that was obviously to set up for the Alabama game. But this game, I mean, I don't think Dan Mullen did anything like that against for the LSU game for next week. But Florida just, I don't know. Again, Dan Mullen mentioned that they need to be held more accountable as a coaching staff on the players. I don't know how much of that it is. I don't know if they have a game plan and it just doesn't execute. I don't know if it's the players not listening to what the play needs to be called. I don't know. But the way Florida's been playing the last 2 weeks, which has been complete opposite of what they played the previous 2 weeks against Alabama and Tennessee, there's no way Florida's going to beat LSU going into LSU next week. And that's the big concern. You have LSU, you have your bye, and then you play Georgia. So I'm not really worried about Can LSU compete? Can Florida compete with LSU? They can, but I don't know. It's really strange how, and I understand offense is more of a rhythm. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. But the first 4 games, it was just boom, 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 boom. Offense moved out will, ran the ball, did whatever they wanted to do, and then you run into a good defense in Kentucky. Couldn't do much offensively, and then the game today, it just seemed very meh across the board, offensively and defensively, for the Florida Gators. So, you guys have any comments, questions? Go ahead and drop them below. I know I'm starting a little late. I went to the game today, as this is the Gators final report. We're on the Gators channel and the SEC channel at the Voice of College Football. First downs were dead even at 18 apiece. Florida ended up with almost 500 yards total, with 479 to Vandy's 287. Penalties again for Florida was horrible. 8 penalties for 80 yards. They had, how many was it last week? 60 or 70? And obviously the penalties were a huge part in the 6 false starts that Vandy had. The 8 false starts that Florida had against Kentucky. And there were a couple of times today where Dan Mullen got pissed at Emory Jones for not being aware of the snap clock. This was in the second half. Dan Mullen got mad at Todd Grantham when Vandy was in the goal line, and and they should have had the touchdown, but the guy for Vanderbilt dropped it. There was a lot of things that Florida needs to clean up that they haven't executed well this week or last week against Kentucky and Vanderbilt today before they play LSU next week. One thing that stood out to me was I thought Anthony Richardson would play a little bit more in the second half. The game was like 28-0. I thought he would come in and get a lot of reps, but Emory Jones kind of stayed a little bit longer. And Anthony Richardson didn't look that good. Florida Gator faithful and Gator Nation would have told you that he should have played against Alabama more if he were healthy. He should have played more against Kentucky, and Emory Jones needs to go. Well, he threw that awful interception, which was something didn't seem right on that. Finished 4 for 6, and they had 5 carries for 11 yards, and even running the football. Vandy's defense is one of the worst in Power 5. One of the worst teams in college football. Barely beat UConn last week, and he couldn't break a run late in the fourth quarter. I'm not saying that's a big deal, but had you asked Gator Nation leading up to the last couple of weeks before he got hurt, I don't know how much the injury is bothering him at all. If it is still a little bit lingering on him, it shouldn't be. I don't think it is. But the way he was rolling against USF and FAU, you would have thought he would keep a little bit of that resemblance, especially today against Vandy, and he didn't. Another injury, Malik Davis didn't play. No big deal. The running back for Florida's well-known, has a lot of depth. Pierce played a lot more, and Naquan Wright got the boatload of carries. But Kyer Elam out again. I'm getting the sense that he's pulling Jabari Zuniga. If you remember from 2019, Zuniga was the guy that he got hurt early in the year. I forget what game it was in 2019, but he gets hurt, and then he's expected to come back, and then he doesn't dress. And then he's expected to play the following week, and then doesn't dress. And then he played against the Georgia game. He was more of a decoy, wasn't a factor much, made 2 big plays in that Georgia game in 2019 when Florida lost 24-17, and then didn't play the rest of the year. I'm wondering if Elam is falling into that realm, if he's falling under that same situation. Let me know in you guys' comments. Drop a question if you have any. But that's what it feels like to me. It feels like Kyer Elam can play. I don't know if because he was expected to go against Kentucky, if you remember, or no, not Kentucky. Yes, it was Kentucky. It was after the Tennessee game, and Dan Mullen said, yeah, we expect Kyer Elam to play against Kentucky. This was right after the Tennessee game, because there was a lot of injuries that Florida didn't play against Tennessee. Gene DeLance, the tackle, Kyer Elam, and there were a few other guys. But Kyrie Elam didn't play again, which is a surprise. I wonder if he's sitting out and he just doesn't want to play. If the injuries, maybe he thought he could come back, came to practice, and then he's not 100% healthy. I don't know, but it definitely the optics don't look good when you're expected to play 2 weeks ago and you don't play and you haven't played since. And it's go time for Florida now. You're 4-2. You have a tough road test next week against LSU. You have a bye, and then it's Georgia. Again, I don't know his timetable. If you guys have a comment, let me know in the comments section. But it definitely feels off for him to be out this long when he was expected to play a couple weeks ago. So that's just my opinion. That was the biggest thing I took away. I don't really take much away from this Florida Vandy game other than Florida looked sloppy. It was pretty much a continuation of what they looked like against Kentucky. Just execution wasn't there. Dan Mullen was getting on his guys a lot. And he mentioned that accountability, that he needs to be held more accountable in his coaching staff on the players. And I don't like how inconsistent Dan Mullen has been lately. He's in the offseason, he was just always talking, saying whatever he wants. And I don't have a fine with that. Just be consistent. Things were good when you're winning, but when you're losing, he didn't want to say much. So when he went to halftime, I forget the reporter's name for ESPN, asked him, how's your offense? We need to get better. How's the defense? Awful. Like that's not Dan Mullen. Again, be consistent. I don't care what it is. If you're always going to be, keep one-word answers, always keep one-word answers. But Dan Mullen's always been a dude that's harped on and constantly, always elaborates with his answers. And then things haven't looked good since last Saturday, and he hasn't spoke much. After the Kentucky game, the PR team for Florida got him in and out of there. Didn't answer a lot of questions. The presser Monday did not look good. Very awkward. It wasn't Jim McElwain awkward, but it was pretty awkward. And then today, I didn't see the press conference today, but the halftime speech when he met with a silent reporter for ESPN, 3 words with 2 questions. That's not what Dan Mullen's always done. I'm going to read right now what Nick Delatorre had to say from what he tweeted from what Dan Mullen said at his press conference. Just give me one moment. But if you're just joining us, this is the Gators Final Report. I'm the host, Dylan Denmark, at the voice of college football. Make sure you're not only subscribing to the SEC channel and the Florida Gator channel, but also all of the other channels that have post-game shows. I know Georgia has one after following the Auburn game, Oklahoma, Texas. That was a huge game, game that went down to the wire. That's probably one of the best games of the season. And there's a post-game going on right now for that show. One thing Florida didn't do well last week was Florida offensively was throw the football downfield. Emory Jones threw the ball, I think, once after post 20 yards, threw the ball through the air more than 20 yards. He was asked about it in the post game. He said, quote, the defense determines where the passing game goes. That's a big deal. They kind of determine where the passes go depending on what the coverages are. Says Vandy's coverages allowed for more deep passes today. Yeah, Copeland had a deep pass. Whittemore caught. That was a sweet pitch and catch that Whittemore had in the corner of the end zone. But yeah, Florida. I mean, you kind of expected that again. You don't really take much away from this Vandy game. Vandy is one of the worst teams, obviously the worst team in the SEC, and one of the worst teams in college football, period. So it's kind of hard. I'm just not going to have a hard opinion on one way or the other from this game. I just know that they didn't execute and they looked really sloppy for the entirety of the game. If Vandy had a better quarterback, Vandy would have probably scored at least, I would say, 28 points. I could be wrong on that, but I was at the game, and there were a lot of plays to be made on Vanderbilt's side. And they moved the ball like 4 times in the second and third quarter, 3 missed field goals, all wide left, and the touchdown that was ended up being bobbled and ruled incomplete. That's 16 points right there. Going back to Matt, or sorry, not Matt Elam, Kyer Elam. Elam was, quote, right on the edge of being able to play. Mullen says it was a, quote, game time decision. Elam wanted to play. So I'm going to go with what Dan Mullen said there. He's been saying that last couple of weeks, but I mean, he better be able to play next week because the way this Florida defense is playing right now, and I mean, you can say what you want. LSU narrowly lost to Auburn. Orgeron is probably on the highest of seats in college football. That's a different conversation. The game's at noon for the first time in forever, understanding that crazy 2016 year where LSU didn't want to come to Florida from the hurricane, and the game's never at noon. But the way Florida's playing right now, they can't beat LSU. Now, it's not saying I don't think they will, and obviously LSU still has to play today. But yeah. Florida needs to carry Elam back in that defensive backfield. Mullen was asked about a couple of injuries. He said, we'll find out. He was asked about his halftime interview. He said, quote, I probably said more words in the locker room. Yeah. He had a lot of words on the sideline. I don't know if you guys can let me know in the comment section. It looked like the that's on the sideline. He was running his mouth a lot. I don't know if they mentioned it on the TV broadcast, but I was watching him. He got after Todd Grantham. He got after Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson. He pulled them to the side right at the end of the first half, and he just didn't seem happy. And I'm trying to find out and see what else Dan Mullen said. He said the team had a great attitude. They, as coaches, need to do a better job. Accountability. Yeah, the last 2 weeks, the way Florida's played against Kentucky and Vandy has not been good at all. And there's no way on earth that you're going to beat Georgia playing the way Florida did the last 2 weeks. And you probably won't beat LSU at their place if Florida plays like it did against Kentucky and Vanderbilt. So, again, if you're just joining us, this is the Gators Final Report at the Voice of College Football. We're live at the SEC and the Florida Gator channel. You can follow me on Twitter right there at Dylan_Denmark. This is the Gators Final Reports. We do this after every single Florida Gator football game. This is the like 5, 6, 1. I think the 6th one for me. We'll do this again next week for the LSU game. That should be a big one. That'll be a big test for Florida. And we'll see how that game goes. Because if Florida loses that game, they're probably not going to have anything for Georgia. And then you go to the last month of the season, and it probably won't be pretty. You'll probably win all those games in November, but obviously this season and everything that Florida fans, not obviously the team too, but what fans really hoped for was to compete in the SEC East, compete with Georgia, and play for an SEC title. That's over with. The crowd was I showed up at like 12:15, so right after Florida's first drive. It was mostly packed. I was expecting it to be like 70,000. So I mean, I expected it to be a lot less. If you can remember a couple of years ago, Dan Mullen was talking about he was really getting on the student section. The student section showed up. I was really surprised, especially after the performance that Florida played against Kentucky. And then it being Vandy too. There's no draw with Vandy. And then college students, everybody's out Friday night. They're probably waking up at probably 10, 11 o'clock. But I mean, the crowd's a lot better than I thought today for the Gators. Florida covered. Good news for me. Yeah, Florida hit the They covered and the under. I thought the under was definitely going to hit. I think the under was like 60. And they finished with Florida finished with a 42-0 game against Vanderbilt. But Florida, the Vanderbilt game, Vandy definitely left a lot of points on the board. They had a touchdown that went through, or the guy had it, and then it bobbled through his hands, and then 3 missed field goals. And if Vanderbilt had any type of quarterback, Vandy easily should have had 4 to 5 touchdowns, at least 3. And that's concerning because Georgia was up on Vandy 35-0 at the end of the first quarter. Now, I understand Georgia had a little pent-up aggression probably against Vandy after that game was supposed to play, got canceled with COVID, and then they rescheduled and it got canceled again. So they didn't play last year. So I feel like Georgia took it out on Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt's not a good team. In Florida, it didn't look like where Florida is supposed to be right now and where Vanderbilt is right now. It didn't look like it was on the field. You can check out you can look at the final score, but the outcome doesn't always tell you all of the little details. At halftime, the total yards were like dead even. After Vandy missed that touchdown, running the ball, Florida didn't really run it as well as they have to start the season in their first 4 games, like they did against USF, FAU, Alabama, and Tennessee. And that's weird. I understand that Ethan White didn't play today. There was another I forget his name, number 65, that he got hurt, and I don't think he came back, but he'll probably play next week against LSU. It's really weird how Florida just didn't dominate and run the ball. They had about 480 yards total, mostly running. And Emory Jones played decent. He didn't play great. He didn't play awful. There was 1 interception he had. Anthony Richardson. It's funny, Gator Nation has been harping on Emory Jones hasn't been playing well, and Anthony Richardson needs to get in. And I think you saw definitely a huge what's the word I'm trying to use? A huge question. That's not the right word, but you saw why Anthony Richardson hasn't gotten more snaps and gotten more passing downs for Florida. You can tell, specifically today, you could tell a little bit last week that Anthony Richardson doesn't know the playbook completely 100%. It looked like on the play through the interception, like he was kind of confused at where his guy was, his pocket awareness. And he didn't really run the ball like he did in the first 2 games against FAU and USF. I understand USF's one of the worst teams in football, and FAU is the talent disparities pretty vast, as it is against Vanderbilt today. But he didn't. It didn't look like he. Like usually Anthony Richardson, when he comes into town, it pops off the board for you, and it didn't look like that today. So that'll be interesting to see. I don't think the hamstring is bothering him as much anymore. He should be at least 95% after sitting out a couple of weeks after hurting it against USF. But Emory Jones is going to be the guy unless he bombs. That's pretty much my biggest takeaway at the quarterback position for Florida. If you're just joining us, this is the Gators Final Report. I am the host, Dylan Denmark. You can see right there. You can follow me on Twitter at Dylan_Denmark. We do this after every single Florida Gator game at the SEC channel and the Florida Gator channel as Florida comes out victorious 42-0 over Vanderbilt. Didn't really take too much out of it. I'm usually one that takes notes throughout the game, and I was at the game today like I was for all the home games outside of the Tennessee game. But, it's hard to say that, Florida's this and that, and when Florida didn't really throw the kitchen sink at anything. A couple of guys were hurt. Elam didn't play again today. Malik Davis didn't play. A couple injuries on the offensive line. Dan Mullen said, we'll see how it goes throughout the week. Pretty much practice. Kyrie Elam didn't play. That was huge. Again, not huge that he didn't play today, but huge that he didn't play, period. Specifically after the Tennessee game when Elam got hurt against Bama, Dan Mullen said Elam was ready to go. And he didn't play against Tennessee. Okay, that was fine. Could have used him against Kentucky. He said he wasn't ready. And today he said it was a game time decision. And he needs to go against LSU. That needs to happen. Because Florida's defensive secondary, Marshall's played really well. That's probably another big takeaway that I took from today. He played a good game. Dean played a really, really good game, had a couple of nice hits and got a pick. I didn't understand why he got the pick and went straight to the sideline. But because he probably could have cut it upfield and gotten another 15, 20 yards at least. But he went straight to the sideline and just took it out of bounds. Dean played well. Marshall played well. But Florida needs Elam, especially against LSU. In Death Valley game is going to be at noon, so we'll probably do the same thing. I will have the Gators final report for you after the game, right around 3:45, 4 o'clock. I'm interested to see what that spread will be. If I had to guess, if you're just joining us, drop a comment, question, or concern from the Gators, whether it pertains to today's game against Vandy or against LSU next week. I wonder what the spread will be. If I had to guess, man, the way Florida's played the last 2 weeks, I would say LSU is a favorite, but I think it's going to be close. I think probably LSU opens up as a no more than 3-point favorite. Because usually you look at home field, LSU has it. Coaching, Mullen, I would say, is better than Coach O. And then the quarterback play is slightly better with Florida, but it's not that big of a difference between Florida and LSU next week. So I think Florida will be a slight underdog to start. So that means tomorrow. Throughout the week, money rolls in, and probably if I had to guess, it'd probably go in Florida's favor. But who knows? It should be I think the game should be close to a pick 'em. So we'll see how the spread goes for Florida LSU. I'll have a game. I should catch up with Jeff Cardozo, who does the pregame show for the Florida Gators Monday, and he calls all the Florida Gator baseball games. Does the tailgate with WRUF ESPN Gainesville with Pat Dooley from 4 to 6. I should catch up with him Monday afternoon. I'll post that show on the SEC channel and the Gators Gator channel at the Voice of College Football. And I'll see what Jeff Cardozo has to say if I'm able to catch up with him, get some time with him, and just talk about whatever. Especially offensively, they haven't been rolling like they have wanted to. They threw the ball a little more downfield today than they did against Kentucky. Copeland caught a deep ball. He got all 75 yards on that one drive in the second half. Copeland had 2 catches for no yards again. And the Florida Vandy, the first half, the stats were dead even. That's a huge, huge question mark. If you look at what Vandy's done all season long, they barely beat UConn, competed with them. UConn is not good, to say the least. And Georgia smoked Vanderbilt. They blew them out of the water. The score at the end of the first quarter was 35-0 Georgia. But I mean, Vandy so far, as I pull up their schedule real quick, they barely beat Colorado State. They lost to East Tennessee State by 20. They got beat by 20 by Stanford. And they won by 2 against UConn. And, you know, Florida gets to the tough part of the schedule starting next week. You play LSU on the road. You have a bye, so you reassess. And then you play the world's largest cocktail party in Jacksonville between Florida and Georgia. So we'll see. I want to see Kyrie Elam get healthy. I want to see Florida get back to what they did in the first 4 games, which is run the football and do it consistently. It's pretty surprising. And again, I know Ethan White didn't play today. There was a couple of linemen that didn't play. One got hurt. But still, it's Vanderbilt. They're not good. You should be able to just move the pile and move at will against them, because Florida finished with 181 rushing yards. They led the country. Florida did. It was like just under 400 yards, and this is a Vandy team that's not good. And you have 180, and then last week too, Florida didn't have that many rushing yards as they usually do. I think they had 170, if I'm correct. Just really odd, really odd that how you play Tennessee now, who Tennessee's rolling. They scored more than 100 points in the last 2 games. Florida dominates them. And the second half was a slow start to start the first half. You run the ball at will against Alabama, and you do whatever you want against FAU, USF, and then you haven't been able to regroup after the Kentucky debacle. I don't know. It seems really odd to me that you go from that to then. I understand. I was talking with I call high school football out in a small town, Baldwin in Jacksonville, and one of the head coaches, he called plays the last couple of years. He said offense is a lot like a rhythm. Some games you have it, some you don't. And there's no rhyme or reason. It's kind of like momentum. You don't know how to get momentum. You just have it. But I mean, with Florida, a lot of it's with execution. And Dan Mullen wasn't happy a lot of the game on the sideline, having a lot of short answers. Had an awkward press conference Monday. So we'll see how it goes throughout the week, because you have a big game against LSU this Saturday, noon kick in LSU. So it probably won't be as loud, but obviously it will be loud. And you talk about noise playing a factor. When Florida played Kentucky last week, you had 7-8 false starts and over 70, 80 yards and penalties. And you had 15 penalties. That's horrible. You can't beat any team in the SEC that's somewhat decent. And so Florida goes back on the road. And we'll see if Dan Mullen changes anything with the snap count. We'll see if Emory Jones has better communication with his offensive line, with the clap, if they move their leg. Because that was shocking to me last week that Florida didn't adjust after 4. I heard this from this guy that trains quarterbacks, Denny Thompson, in Jacksonville, and he does shows for 1010XL and Jacksonville Sports Radio, which is the flagship station for the Gators in Jacksonville. Emory Jones, they went with the clap, and a lot of teams do that on the road. And after 4, it becomes an issue. And Florida got to 8, and they never changed it. One, that's surprising to me because you have an experienced offensive line. It's not like you're playing with a bunch of freshmen. 2, you have Dan Mullen. Who's coached in the SEC for more than a decade with Mississippi State. You're talking about him every other year going on the road to Alabama, to LSU, to Auburn, to Ole Miss, and then every now and again playing a Florida, playing a Georgia, hostile environments. And again, it's not adjusting. So let's see if that plays a factor next week, because if Florida has anything, if they have anything in penalties like they did against Kentucky, against LSU, you can forget about it. Florida's not going to be able to compete. Florida's not going to come out there with a win. And they have to get back to running the football like they did in the first couple of games, because I don't think Florida's going to beat LSU with just, I would even say 200 yards. They need to get somewhere north of 280 to 300 like they did those first couple of games. So we'll see what Florida does next week. And I'll see especially too, another thing that if you notice it, if you follow Florida football, Dan Mullen always has a game plan for big games. If you look at the Georgia game last year, if you look at the Alabama game this year, he has a excellent game plan. He's able to adjust, and he has plays that he keeps away in the first half that he uses in the second half. Let's see if he does that against LSU. LSU, doesn't look like one of the better teams that they have had recently. But again, that doesn't mean that they can't go and beat Florida. I can't. Who does LSU play today? LSU should have beaten Auburn last week. They had a 13-0 lead, and then they ended up blowing it. Oh, LSU plays Kentucky today at 7:30. So that's another big game for LSU. I'd probably take Kentucky in that game over LSU. So you have to also factor too. So I've been all about Florida talking about LSU. How does LSU react? LSU just came up with a game they didn't finish against Auburn. Bo Nix had a great game, a great finish rather, and then if they fall short of Kentucky, how does LSU's crowd react? Do they show up like they do a lot of fans show up, or are they mad and they don't show up, or are they not as loud? Because I mean, the crowd, you definitely tell against Kentucky played a huge role. But I think that'll wrap it up today for the Gators Final Report. Check out all the post-game shows at the Voice of College Football between Texas, Oklahoma, the Georgia game after following the Auburn game. Iowa has a big game against Penn State. Iowa has their own post-game show. Check out all those post-game shows. And then, of course, you can catch tonight on the nightcap to recap with Mark Rogers. He takes your calls and all sorts of things. And make sure we're subscribing to all of the channels. If anyone has a last-minute comments, I will go ahead and answer it. Florida gets the cover. They cover the spread 38-39. I forget what final at, but Florida wins 42-0, and the under hits if you care about those things. I think LSU comes out as a slight favorite to start the week against Florida just because they're at home, unless they completely drop the ball against Kentucky, which I don't think they'll do. I think it'll be a good game between LSU and Kentucky, but Florida has to be able to run the ball and execute to win the game next week against LSU. You have about 350, 400 yards the first couple of games, and you had 180 last two. It's been a complete 180, and that's been their success. And they need to run the ball to set up the passing game. It seems like because Florida's not going to be a team that's going to go into LSU and just throw the ball at will like they did last year. Florida has to be able to run the ball to succeed. So that's my final thought. I'll catch up with Jeff Cardozo Monday. I am Dylan_Denmark on Twitter. This is the Gators Final Report. Catch me next week after the LSU game. And I think that will do it. Everyone have a good weekend. I'll catch you next week between Florida and LSU post game at the Gators Final Report.